Alan Rowland again. And I want to tell you a story today, and it's one of America's nightmares, one of America's horror stories. It took place in 1905 and 1906 in Gadsden, Alabama. Now, this is where Etowah County is located. It's in the northeastern section of Alabama. You can visit there today. Nice city. Population, I forget what it is, something like 26,000 something on that order. But anyway, what this topic deals with today, and oh, by the way, I had somebody to ask me the other day, said, why are your topics so serious? Why don't you add a little levity to it? Well, a topic such as this is very difficult to do so. This is honestly no laughing matter whatsoever. But the topic today deals with a lynching. Now, if you're not familiar with a lynching, this is taking the life, of usually a minority individual here. And between the years of 1882 and 1962, that's 80 years, there were 4,000 lynchings to take place in the United States. Most of these took place in the South, unfortunately. Some did take place elsewhere, but most of them took place in the South. But the one we're going to be talking about today is one that is very, very little heard of, and it deals with the lynching of a person by the name of Bunk Richardson. So let me go to my camera here, and I'll give you the title of it here, The Lynching of Bunk Richardson. The information I gave you is right here below that. And all of these events took place between the 16th of July in 1905, and I failed to type that in, so I wrote it in for you, to the 11th of February in 1906, in which that was the date in which Bunk Richardson was executed or actually lynched. These are the individuals that come to play in this short topic here. Bunk Richardson, who was lynched. Another individual, Jack Hunter. Bunk Richardson, by the way, was a black man, 28 years of age. He was born in Talladega and moved to Gadsden. I think he worked in the quarries there. The other individual is Jack Hunter. Jack Hunter, who was 24 years of age. He was also a black man. He'll be executed. His cousin, Vance Gardner. Some people call him Garner, and I'll slip between Gardner and Garner. And he was 23 years of age. He'll be executed. Another individual, black man by the name of William Johnson. William Johnson, who was 27 years of age, worked as a baggage handler. I suspect it was with the L&N Railroad, but I'm not really sure about that. And Sarah Jane Smith, a white woman, 44 years of age. She was murdered. And then the governor of Alabama, William Jelks. Those are the individuals that are the key figures that are involved in this. Now, if you go to Gadsden today, you'll see a historical marker. I'll show you where this is later on. And it just tells you about the lynchings that took place across America. This is one of several markers, one of two markers that were placed in 2016, as a matter of fact. I'm not going to read through all of this. I'll tell you a little bit about it. I already told you some of it. And another marker that is found, this is actually the other side of that marker, and it tells you about the lynching of Bunk Richardson. All right, you can go to these markers today, located on Locust Street, and I think it is Locust and First Street. I believe that's the location of that. But let's go back in time, and I want to take you to the 16th of July in 1905. And on that date, a white lady by the name of Sarah Jane Smith, was found murdered. She'd been strangled, her neck was broken, it had all the appearances like she'd been dragged down a ravine, by her hair. Her face was all bruised and cut up. Her stockings were missing, her shoes were off of her. It had the appearances that she'd been sexually violated, maybe a rape took place, maybe she'd just been murdered. I really don't know about that whatsoever. But shortly after that, three individuals were arrested. And one of these individuals, Vance Gardner, another individual is a person by the name of Will Johnson, and the other individual was Bunk Richardson. Bunk Richardson never had charges placed against him whatsoever here. Alrighty, so those three individuals were arrested. Subsequently, we had three other individuals, to include one female, and they were all placed in the Etowah County Jail, which is located in Gadsden there. And apparently three of those individuals were subsequently released there. But during that night, over 200 rioters, protesters, mobsters, if you will, surrounded the jail. The circuit judge of the city of Gadsden came outside, and he had a pistol, had a revolver on his side, and he told the individuals, he said, just leave the area. And through his persuasion, and actually for the mob, they had no real leadership, and so the mob broke up, and that was it. Now, the next day, the sheriff of Etowah County decided for the safety of those individuals and that he would transport them to Birmingham, Alabama for their safety anyway. And they were taken to Birmingham. Subsequently, 2 of them were brought back, and that was Will Johnson and that of Vance Garner. And they were placed on trial there. And during the trial, some of the proceedings, testimony that came out, stated that Vance Garner and Bunk Richardson were walking down the railroad tracks. This was on the night, if you will, of 16th of July in 1905, and it was late at night, and they were looking to purchase some whiskey. And they were going down the railroad tracks, and they heard a woman scream, and Vance Garner said something to the effect like, "That sounds like my sister," and he went to investigate. And when he did so, this came out in the trial, that he stumbled across his cousin, Jack, and Jack was violating this woman. He was strangling this woman. This woman, Sarah Jane Simons, was screaming, Sarah Jane Smith, I'm sorry, was actually screaming, "Help me, save me, he's killing me." And Vance Garner just, he said, "Leave her alone," but he didn't want to get involved, and he went away. And Bunk Richardson, who did not want to get involved, wasn't even present right there, and he just stayed apart from this, and then Vance Garner joined with him. Well, the strange thing about it was the next day when the body was found there, and Will Johnson, who was a black man, went to the sheriff's department, and he was just kind of nosing around a little bit, somewhat pretending like he had a little bit of information, and he was arrested too. So anyway, so he was one of the 3 that was present there. Now for Jack fled, and they didn't know where he was. And as it turned out, he was in Birmingham, Alabama. A $500 reward had been posted for him, and he heard people talking about the reward and that he was present, was missing there, and so he returned to Gadsden. And when he did so, he went under his mother's house, and that's where he was discovered there. So he was subsequently arrested too. The trial that took place for Will Johnson and Jack and Vance found all of them, the 3 of them, to be guilty. And of course, it turned out, that they were executed, not Will Johnson. Will Johnson had written a letter, and he was pleading his pleading his innocence. And he was an uneducated individual, but he was able to at least write a little bit. And through the use of his efforts of his attorneys, that letter made its way to the governor, William Jelks. And William Jelks, he had just prolonged, shall we say, the execution of Will Johnson. And so he just postponed it for a period of time on into February. And as it turned out, the governor, Jelks, ended up commuting the sentence of Will Johnson and sent him to the prison in Wetumpka, where he died 5 years later from tuberculosis. Well, that in itself upset an angry mob which was present in Gadsden, and on the night of 11th of February in 1906, they went to the jail, and I'm not sure how many of the mobsters that were present there, at least 20 of them, but 3 of them wearing hoods went up to the jail, knocked on the jail door, and the sheriff and his family were asleep inside, like in their quarters. And anyway, when the sheriff went to the door, the 3 guys there in hoods pulled a pistol on him, and in fact fired pistol shots up into the ceiling of the jail, and forced the sheriff to allow them to enter there. And then this allowed access to another 20 or so members of the mob to come inside, and when they did so, they found the keys to the jail and to the cells itself, and they went into the cell of Bunk Richardson, and they got him out. And the man was frightened to death. He was wearing his night clothes and was so frightened that he could not even speak. And they carried Bunk Richardson out and dragged him out. And I'm sure he was bound at this point. Carried him behind the jail itself out on Chestnut Street and turned east on Chestnut Street. I'll show you on the map in just a few minutes. Went down the first street, and once they got there, they made a left, went a couple of blocks down to Locust Street, and that's where a railroad trestle is. It was for the L&N Railroad, Louisiana and Nashville Railroad, and forced him out. And for Bunk Richardson, he kept stumbling, or perhaps they were tripping him and knocking him down, and then beating him and bringing him to his feet and marching him, forcing him on a few more steps, knocked him to the ground again. But once they got to the railroad trestle, they went out 200 yards out on the railroad trestle. Had a 20-foot length of rope, and they tied one length around the railroad trestle, one of the rails there, and the other length around his neck, and then just threw him over the edge of the trestle. Now, the Coosa River is below about 70 feet, I guess, 60, 70 feet below. And, of course, this hanged Bunk Richardson. Several people in the mob took shots with their weapons at him. In fact, one of the shots struck Bunk Richardson in the head. Today, and I'm not including any photographs of Bunk Richardson. There's only two that I am aware of anyway. One of those is showing Bunk Richardson, suspended from the bridge, and he's dead. And the other one is after they pulled his body up from being hanged, and he's on the railroad trestle itself. I don't want to show those photographs, and YouTube would censor my video if I did try to show those. So if you're morbidly curious about that, you'll have to find those on your own. Now, for the family of Bunk Richardson, for all the immediate family, they just left Gadsden. People in the black community were just frightened beyond all means there, because they were afraid that they would be lynched too. The body of Buck Richardson, the sheriff informed his wife, and he was married, possibly had 2 children, not sure about that. And the wife just said, they killed him, let them take care of burying him. And Bunk Richardson today is buried, we think anyway, in the 6th Street Cemetery. That's the old cemetery, overgrown today, and I think it's called Southland Cemetery too. But it's overgrown. It was a cemetery for blacks and for indigents. It's just poverty individuals. But anyway, I'll show you a photograph of that cemetery shortly anyway. So let's go back to our camera here, sharing a couple of photographs with you. This is the railroad trestle that spans over the Coosa River. Now, where this lynching took place was right up in this area, right through here. I'll show you another photograph in just a second. Here it is. This is a different view. This is looking from where the markers are. The markers are down here that I was showing a few minutes ago, and where the lynching took place was roughly in this area here. All right. Another photograph showing you the 6th Street Cemetery, and I believe I have that upside down. There it is right there. Very unkept cemetery, and here's someone identified this as the actual burial site here of Bunk Richardson. Here, I'm not really sure about that. That was years and years ago. At that time, there was no grave marker that was left there. Now we can find today, I've not seen this, but today somebody has placed this grave marker here showing you Bunk Richardson, born 1877 and died on this date, and the early mornings, possibly around 12 midnight or 1 o'clock. All right, now here's a map showing you downtown Gadsden. And let me get myself oriented here. Here's the courthouse. Over here is the Coosa River, and the courthouse is present here. It's still there today if you wish to go there. But where Buck Richardson was taken was out of the jail, out of the courthouse, and then was walked, shall we say, and as I said, he was being knocked down and picked up, beaten, down Chestnut Street, all the way down here to 1st Street, and then turn to the north here. Ironically, for those of you familiar with Gadsden, this is where the M. Sampson monument is located today. It was erected in 1906, but I don't think it was there when Bunk Richardson was forced by it. And they went down a couple of blocks here to where Locust Street is, and on to the east here. And of course, this is where the markers are today that I was showing you a few minutes ago. And this is the railroad trestle here, and where the lynching took place was right there too. So interesting topic here, and a very, very sad, very tragic topic here, about Bunk Richardson. And what spurred me on with this, I happened to be in Gadsden last week, and I read that historical marker there, and that got me interested in this. I had never even heard of this incident before. But anyway, it's been a fascinating subject to explore for the past several days. Thank you very much for your interest.